So Jeff, before we end today's call, can you walk us through kind of what you're seeing in the market? What are some of the obvious opportunities out there, and kind of what are some of the things that people are looking for down the road?
Well, if you acquired property when it was really cheap, it's probably not a bad time with 3.2 months inventory to think about selling some of it. The market it's insanely hot. But the neat thing is the cash percentage is still 30%. And you have 30% of last month of the purchases were cash with sub 3% interest rates. I mean, it's kind of mind boggling. I have a private loan on just about everything that I have a loan on. And I just would rather not have a traditional banker in my life. But like I've got my house I live in, I have a 5% private loan on it. And I'm at the point where, 2 3/4, it may be worth the brain damage of having a bank in my life. I mean, for me, it's if I change insurance companies, I text a picture of the deck page to the mortgage holder and he says, cool, and we're done. You know what I mean? It's not quite the same when you're dealing with Bank of America or Wells Fargo. So there's brain damage to have one of the banks in your life. But the interesting thing is like we started out, this was on the 2020 was probably going to be the record year of all record years from a volume perspective, sales count perspective, pricing, not pricing yet. We still haven't eclipsed any of the 2005 stuff. And then the pandemic hit, and now we're back to being positive. When I analyze a market, and I have done market analysis for REITs, for hedge funds, I've done big product offerings on defaulted notes back in the day. I've done a lot of metrics. I'm pretty good with markets. And there's some basic things you want to do. Number one's volume. Number one, the biggest thing is volume. Is the market growing or declining? For me, on a year-over-year perspective, if the volume's growing, I'm what I call risk off, unless there's something else scaring me. If the volume year-over-year is going down, that's the whole supply and demand thing, I'm risk on. So I was risk on during the pandemic. We're now back the year-to-date, and you really don't want to focus on 1 month ever or 2 months ever. You really want to get the year-to-date or 12-month running average against a 12-month running average. But I'm back to being risk off right now. I mean, and it's still shocked at the cash percentage, 30% of the sales being cash in spite of all this. And there is a lot of people out of Northeast. There's a lot of people. There's so much money coming out of California. Steelbridge, we are the broker of record for a group that sells properties nationwide. And I want to say we got like 18 contracts pending, primarily in Northport, and almost every one of them is California money. Yeah. So, I mean, California's a little scary right now. I would not want to be the guy who pitched the REIT to buy that 4-cap multifamily in San Francisco when you can't collect back rent now. So, right. There's a lot of scary things going on in some areas of the country. And we are what I call the catcher's mitt. I mean, us, Texas, pretty much the Gulf Coast is just, for some reason, we're the catcher's mitt. When bad times, they come here. And I'm seeing, give an example, a retail client with Steelbridge. They passed all the gun laws in New York. And we get a call from a guy that wanted to buy a house, and he bought a house on Waterway Estates in North Fort Myers. And I asked him, well, are you hiring a moving company? He goes, well, for almost everything out of moving company. But come to find out, when he got here, this guy's hobby is he built custom AR-15s. And then they made everything he owned illegal. And he goes, I haven't left the house with a gun since they passed that law. Right. And he said, it felt really good to put all of my guns on a U-Haul truck. And he goes, when I crossed that state line, I was no longer a felon. And he's here in town and building AR-15s, and he's a pretty wealthy guy. He's a retired guy. And he's here because they changed the gun laws up there. And as he put it, he goes, he couldn't go to the range. And he lived in the country. He goes, I probably could have gotten away with it. But he goes, weird case scenario. He goes, I'm a felon. If they see me with this rifle, that, he wasn't giving up. Right. So, and there's a lot, not just with the Second Amendment, there's a lot. Taxation's a scary thing in some parts of the country right now. And I don't see how they fix it, because at some point, you've set up the system as a government, and you've got to kind of fill the bucket every year to keep the system running. So I don't see how they'll fix some of the tax situations in this country. But like us, Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arizona, we're the beneficiaries of some just bad choices. So the market's really hot. You've got what I call the high tax state refugees. You've also got millennials were late bloomers. Now they're either buying their first home or a first trade up. And Gen Z is coming into the market heavily. And Gen Z is younger than the millennials. And the interesting thing with Gen Z is they only grew up in good times. They've never seen a recession they were really little when it happened. They were 5, 6, 7 years old. So they really didn't watch the Great Recession. You know, they just knew maybe mom couldn't take them to Chuck E. Cheese as much. So you've got a lot of the new construction entry level is Gen Z. And it's smart at that age to buy a new house because you don't know how to fix nothing. So you're just going to make your dad and your uncle come fix everything. And while they're always going to come, I'm a dad and I'm an uncle, I'm going to go fix it for them. I'm going to be a little grumpy. They better have dinner and all that. So the market's got a lot of weird modalities. You still have a large segment of baby boomer retirees coming in, and the low interest rates and Gen Z emerging as a viable home buyer is enabling a lot of them to sell their homes up north and come here.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. It used to just be I could track the baby boomers and track our market, and we were really good at through presentations at the Southwest Florida RIA. I'm on the record from 2007 forward being right all the way through, and it was really just using the boomer census numbers to kind of extrapolate what our underlying driver is. There's a lot more to the market than just the boomers now, but they're still the richest cohort by far. Yeah. And the beauty is when they come here, they spend a lot of money because they don't have anything else to do. Mm-hmm. And if you don't think there's a huge underlying driver in the market, I would tell you to try and go to Olive Garden on Pine Island Road Friday at 5:30 and just try and get in. And it's basically your grandma and all of her friends trying to go have dinner. And they had lunch there 3 times that week too.
Yeah, absolutely. There are probably 3 things that I want to highlight from what you just mentioned. One is focusing on the macro and the micro. If you look at the macro as a whole, it's hard to figure out what's really happening in the market because you have a lot of massive migrations, you have a lot of people changing patterns, and it's really difficult to pinpoint. Look at the micro, and really when we look at like where people are coming from, you know, I had a buyer who bought a property in Cape Coral. I did a video tour of the property, and that was all they had to see. Went ahead and bought it right away. I had a couple from North Carolina who came and saw 3 properties, immediately put an offer on one of them. And it's that urgency and this understanding of what's so special about this region. And even locally, when we focus in on just Florida as a whole, we have people coming from Tampa, from Orlando, from Miami. Southwest Florida is still very, very affordable, especially with the types of just communities we have, the proximity to beaches, proximity to get to open water on a boat. It's still very affordable. Mm-hmm. And if you're skeptical about the macro and the country and the economy as a whole, it's still perfectly within a reason to be very optimistic about the micro and the local economy. The second thing that you mentioned, I think is pretty impactful, was a generation shift. Sometimes you can drive, like I just drove through Bronxville Road earlier today, and you see just rows and rows of houses, and you think to yourself, where do people work? where is the employer that's hiring all these people? And to your point, they bring their money from Chicago, they bring their money from Boston, they bring the money with them, and they spend it on roofing, they spend it on the house, they spend it on furnishing the home, they spend it on going out to a restaurant, and that's supporting the economy, and it has been for a while. But we're starting to see a shift now where companies, I know what's happening with Hertz, but if you go through their decision-making process, is that Hertz was once in a very expensive, highly taxed, highly regulated part of the country. Mm-hmm. And they thought, when they looked at their senior executives, they looked at where could they move their senior executives to? And the obvious choice was Southwest Florida, because they were looking to retire anyway. So if you're thinking about where organizations will move to down the road and large companies, it's going to be regions like this where people are naturally inclined to want to move to. And so when you think about the low income, the death tax that we don't have one, just the affordability and just the year-round sunshine, I'm not surprised at all of how well our market is doing. So I'm very optimistic being in real estate in the region. I would definitely recommend buying and holding unless you have to sell, and which now is a great time to sell if you have to. But overall, I'm very optimistic of the future. And as long as you understand what's going on, I think that that investing in real estate is a very logical choice, and it's a very exciting and fun choice. Jeff, do you have a final word as far as advice, maybe for someone who's looking to start to join real estate?
Well, at some point, you just got to do one. And at some point, you know, you really have to sit down and define, what am I here to do? The most important question on any journey. It's hard to go on vacation if you don't know where you're going to go on vacation. You really have to know where the end result is, and define the end result, plan everything in between, and you will succeed. I mean, there's going to be bumps in the road, and there's market shifts, and there's all kinds of things that happen. But if you have a top level plan, if you know what you're there to do and can cognizantly answer the 4 questions that we talked about earlier, you have what I call a margin of safety. You have a much higher chance of success. And if you do this right, not only do you do better, you should be able to help your children and your grandchildren. And, it's a generational thing. What wealth can transfer, not as much to wealth, but the knowledge of how to gain wealth is so much more important than money, because you can spend money, but if you can make money, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And the knowledge part is key. You can spend 80 grand going to college or 13 grand buying your first property. I'm not saying not to go to college, but what I'm saying is the knowledge you have can be more impactful when it's hands-on, when it's personal, when you feel that stress, when you build that muscle memory, can be really important to your long-term wealth building plan that you have. Jeff, I do want to thank you for your time. It is Memorial Day weekend. You've been super generous. I'll let you jump back in that pool shortly. Guys, if you want to get more information about how to work with Jeff or myself, please feel free to click on the links in the bottom, and we'll be happy to respond and answer on the questions you have. Jeff, thanks again. Guys, thanks for logging in.